Good afternoon. I don't know if anybody can hear me. Can anyone hear me? Um, so, all right. Um, yeah. I think I should be audible now. I should be audible. Da, 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 da. How is everybody doing? How is everybody doing? How is everybody doing? Just uh yeah, just me today trying to continue just like introduction to JavaScript and just be teaching on some basic stuff in JavaScript, just to continue what we've been doing so far. Um so far we've talked about like um yeah, Samuel, hello, how are you? Thanks for joining. So far, like we talked about the basics of JavaScript, and under the basics, we talked about everything you need to know about anybody who wants to start learning JavaScript. And I sort of divided them into three interesting. Abdul Qadri, how are you? So I sort of divided them into three major modules, right? Three major modules, right? So we've talked about like the basic structure of writing JavaScript, which is like sentences. We talked about use strict. We talked about variables. We talked about data types. What else have we talked about? We've talked about I think we didn't talk about this alert prompt and confirm. Good evening, Olutayo. Olutuyo Adekunle. Your name sounds familiar. Uh Well, good evening, good evening, good evening. Thanks for joining the stream. And we've talked about type conversion, we've talked about basic mathematical operators, we've talked about comparisons, even though there's something I didn't talk about in this comparison. I didn't talk about I didn't talk about comparing strings. I didn't talk about this ability to compare strings using JavaScript compare strings using a very peculiar algorithm. So, the algorithm is written here. Basically, this is like everything that happens when JavaScript tries to compare two strings together. But again, I feel like I'm still going to talk about it in depthly later. So we can still run away for now. And what else? I also talked about we talked about conditional branching, which is like the if statement. We talked about the logical operators, right? We talked about null coalescing operators, yeah. And we talked about, I think I learned the bitwise operator as well on the stream alongside with everybody. It was a very wonderful time there for me too. And we talked about the while loop, right? The loops basically, the whiles, the do while, the normal while. Then we talked about the for loop. We didn't talk about the loops in the array yet, but there's some interesting things that we can always look into as well. You can loop within an object, you can loop within an array, right? You can actually use an array to loop, because the array gives us some amazing and interesting things to carry out our loop there. Another interesting thing that we have is we talked about functions, right? So under functions here, you talked about the declaration of functions. You talk about like, parameters. You talked about local variables. You talk about global variables. You talk about the return statement. We talked about using default values, and we talked about calling of a function. Then we move to function expressions, right? Just turning the function declaration into a variable and calling it, right? And we talked a little bit about arrow functions, right? The concept of replacing a function expression. You replace the, what's it called now, you replace the function keyword that you have in a function with some interesting, you replace it with an array, with an arrow, basically. And it's something similar to lambda, if you have idea of what lambda means in Python. So yeah, I did a little bit about callback. It wasn't too much. I did a little bit about callbacks. So basically today, I want to try to see if we can look at what all of these things means, right? Talking about like debugging in the browser. What does it mean to debug stuff in a browser? Coding styles, comments, and this is something they call ninja code, right? I mean, it's not anything serious. It's just about writing code in a very consistent way, just going deeper into the way you write code. And there's something interesting here as well, which is what something we call the automated testing. And we have the polyfills and the transpilers. So these are things that I want us to like look at today. So I don't know if time is going to permit us to look at everything today, but I think it's worth looking at, and it's the interesting things to consider if we can. So I don't know if anybody has any question, any JavaScript concern that you have, you can let me know. Just let me know. And another thing, I mean, I can tell you some interesting things that is happening in the JavaScript ecosystem. That's like another thing I want to add into the stream, right? Some of the interesting things that is happening in the JavaScript ecosystem. Dino is just another. I don't know if anybody knows Dino, but I've always talked about Dino as like another very super interesting thing for everybody to really know about. Dino is really moving with a very good speed. Dino is just like from Node. The creator of Node is the person who created Dino. So all the mistakes he made in Node is trying to correct them inside of Dino. And Dino is just, they're moving so fast. They're doing amazing stuff. They have a lot of magic inside there. A lot of magic inside there. This is worth looking at, right? If you want to really become like a very great guy, a very great engineer, Dino is something that you can always look into. And there's this argument about performance of JavaScript, most especially considering all the JavaScript engines that we have around, right? So I don't know. I think I can't remember the name of the company. They wrote a blog post, talking about the performance of. I think it's the Cloudflare team created a particular thing. I don't know, a particular JavaScript runtime now that they are trying to sell, something just like your V8, or yeah, I mean they're trying to. Dino is not a framework, so Dino is just like, how do I explain Dino? To be honest, Dino is just something that allows us to build asynchronous JavaScript. So build asynchronous JavaScript. The way it is how many persons know that JavaScript can only do one thing at a time? How many persons know that? That the JavaScript we write inside of the browser can only do one thing at a time. So basically that's why sometimes they tell you that JavaScript can be very expensive, right? JavaScript can be very expensive sometimes if you don't know how to write it, or you're just writing different, crazy things. So they created Node.js as a way to run JavaScript not only inside of the browser, but to run JavaScript inside of other environments. Does that make sense? So when Node.js was created, I think around 2008, thereabouts. I don't know if that's correct, anyways, but it should be around that period, 2008, 29. You see, what? Let me just Google search that for me to be sure. Node.js created when? So 2009, I mean 2009. 2009, that's 2009. I mean, it's not bad. So I wasn't too, I didn't miss it too much. So when Node.js came into the scene, that is when we had the ability to write non-blocking JavaScript. So let me explain that non-blocking JavaScript to you. So it means that you can go to the database, like your application can be running, and while the application is running, you can go to the database to fetch information. So while you're fetching that information from the database, you can go to another API and fetch information, and it's not going to stop the execution of your JavaScript, right? That is something you call like non-blocking JavaScript. So it means that, and that's why when you look at Next.js now, the idea of Next.js is like, okay, we are going to allow you to be able to build React applications inside of both your browser and inside of what a server. So it's going to be faster, right? That's the idea that Next.js is, selling, and everybody is like, okay, this makes sense. So the idea is Node came with what you can write non-blocking JavaScript, or something you call asynchronous JavaScript, right? That is, you can now create a server. You can now go to the database, like you can go to database and you can do something that a standard programming language like Java or C Sharp or Python or all these guys, all these things, whatever they can do, you can now do it. That is, you can read a file. That is, you can read a file. You can create CLI applications. So these are things that we didn't have before in Node.js until Node came. So Node gave us that ability to now, okay, so it means that you cannot just write JavaScript inside of the browser, but you can write JavaScript on the server, and most importantly, you can now write JavaScript anywhere, whether it's inside Raspberry Pi, inside anything. So with the advancement of Node, but Node.js is what introduced package.json, or better still, you can say that Node.js made package.json like popular. Then we have, when Node came, there was npm, right? All these jargon started coming. So when npm came, definitely you can say like we have yarn, you have pnpm, you have every of these tools that we have. But initially we usually have like, there's something we call boa. It's boa, bower. These are tools that we use, building tools that you use to build your JavaScript application. But all these tools are no longer in use. Then Babel, right? You have all these tools, they came in. So basically with Node.js, you started having something like Express.js. Does anybody know Express.js here? You have Express, or you have Fastify. Fastify or Express, those are the popular guys in the backend side of things with Node.js. Then you have Koa. I don't know whether Koa is still around. There's Koa, Koa. We have Sales.js. Sales.js is like Ruby, but it's JavaScript that is like Ruby. So you started having all these new, and all these cool things happening like that in the JS ecosystem. And you can now build CLI applications. You can now do a couple of other things. And Node.js right now, Node.js is moving in a very good speed, because Node.js, I think they're implementing a lot of new features, a lot of advancement. So yeah, it's worth knowing if you're a front-end engineer to know about Node, to know what Node.js does behind the scene, right? Because Node.js is, I mean, very useful. There's no way you write front-end engineering, or where you do front-end engineering, without understanding how Node.js works. Node.js sort of like powers everything that really happens on the front-end engineering thing that we sort of like do. So Dino, as I was saying, right? Dino is you can look at Dino. Dino is TypeScript first. That's like the first. That's like the first major thing that they are selling, right? The idea is that, oh, look at, they are doing next generation JavaScript runtime. So I mean, they have, they have all these tools that they are trying to sell. They're trying to sell the Fresh. Fresh is Dino's version of Dino's version of Express. So if you know Express, Fresh is like the Express of what for Dino, right? So it allows you to build good APIs, good backend APIs, very interesting backend. And if you know NPM in Node.js, JSR is equivalent to NPM, right, in Node.js. So another thing is they need a way to make money, right? That's why they are doing all this cloud deploy, right? And they have sub hosting and pricing. So another thing is they have serverless models. They have they have this capability to run some serverless operations. So which is something that is also selling in this generation. The ability to run some serverless operations is the big thing. And the another thing is it is TypeScript first. So I don't know whether all these companies are using it already. So if all these guys are using it, yeah, that's huge already. If all these people are using it. So you have TypeScript first, right? TypeScript first. And TypeScript first is like the most important thing now. If anybody's really going to learn anything. So if we are inside Dino, right, this kind of code will work. And this is like you are typing this person by putting this here, and this is what the function is returned, right? So basically it allows you to write TypeScript first, but we can now create interesting abilities, right? You can create interesting things, right? So that's what. And another thing is um it supports look at here now, it supports like the web. So most of the things that you can do inside of your normal browser, right, you can do it inside Dino. So something like fetch. Before, Node.js does not have fetch, right, but now it has fetch. So those are like the little implications that we have there. I think they removed Windows recent. They will be removing Windows for global.ds. So a lot of interesting things there, right there. It has, so instead of you installing Prettier to do linting for you, they have their own linter built inside. What else? They have their own test runner. So instead of using Jest, right, they have their own test runner built inside. So this is how to write test. And what else? They have something to format your code, right? They have something to format your code. And yeah, they have, you can install, how many of you know that how to run code? If you have written something like C++ before, you know that before you can run some C++ code, you have to compile it, right? That's compile. So when you compile it, then you can now use it. You can now run it like this. So basically, Dino is just happening, and it's a lot of new features that is there. It's just worth trying out, right? Just try it out, play with it, and it is npm compatible as well. So another thing that they are doing is that it is compatible with all the things that is happening from Node.js. They are very compatible, so which is amazing. So here you can see that you can also use your Express here inside of Dino to build an application easily. So this is a backend server here that you're building completely, yeah, and this backend server is just going to be returning hello. So what else? So they have deploying, the ability to deploy, which is something interesting. And what else do they have? It's faster. So they're also trying to make it faster. That's another interesting thing that they're selling. Another thing is they're selling a kind of database called key value, this KV. They're trying to sell this KV. And yeah, basically that's all about like Dino. But see, Dino is something that everybody should really try out. I'm not sure it is going to go extinct. I mean, I think they mean business. So if they mean business, it is worth checking out, basically. So I don't know if anybody wants to play with Dino right there. So today I'm just going to write some JavaScript code here, and we're going to learn how to debug in the browser. We're going to learn how to use your dev tool to to do some debugging right there. And yeah, what else? So we talk about, so during my whole explanation of your debugging in the browser, we're going to be talking about the source panel, right? Something you call the source panel. We'll talk about like what the console really means, right? How do you use the console? Then what does breakpoint means? And we're also going to talk about the debugger. When you see this debugger keyword, what does it mean? And eventually we talk about how to use the debugger. So and then we talk about how you can trace execution of your JavaScript code using the what the using the the tracing capability inside of your debugger. The debugger is a very cool tool. I don't know why most persons really don't know about the debugger. Really, the debugger is a very cool tool that allows you to do some lots of magic. So another thing is, if you want to really, so this document is out of date, right? This document here that they linked is out of date, completely out of date, because this is this is like when Chrome was still in version 65. So Chrome is, I think, the version of Chrome now is around 100 or something, or 101. Where is the I think the version of Chrome right now should be 100 or 101. Okay, that's even past that. That's one. They're on version 123. So these guys are moving so fast. So if you want to know about the dev tool, I think what we can do is we can search for dev tool. You can search for dev tool and get to understand. So the dev tool inside of your browser, they have their own documentation, right? They have their own documentation, and they allow you to be able to understand what is going on inside of your inside of your your browser. So if you want to understand how to use the dev tool more, right, you can come to this page here to really understand all the new features that is built inside of um that is built inside of your your dev tool. But the dev tool is one of the most important tool that you need to understand how it works if you really want to understand how your code is working. And yeah, there's a lot of new things that you have coming in here. So, and I think they keep a list of all the new feature, all the features that has been released for a while now. So this is 124. So they've been keeping a list of all the features that has been coming in. So if you really want to understand all the things that are happening, right, you can go in here. But I will just try to show you what the dev tool is, how to use this dev tool here. All right. So, and they have something called Easter egg. How many of you also know what Easter egg means? Do we have anybody who know what Easter egg means? Easter egg. Do we have anybody who knows what Easter egg means? That's interesting. Easter egg is, I don't know if anybody has played, if you have played like games like Contra or Mario or some of these old school game where you just know that there is a configuration of key that you can press to like beat your opponent. So that is what you call Easter egg. All this little trick that people can hide inside of games, that once you put those trick inside, it can allow you to win your opponent easily. Right? So that's what Easter egg means. So basically I'll talk about that, and eventually I also want to talk about forming a consistent coding pattern. Forming a consistent coding pattern. You can see like the way you write code, putting space where you should put space, right? Just learning to write code in a disciplined way, right? Just learning to write code in a disciplined and more consistent way. And yeah, code styles are very important. Understanding when to use your curly brace, right? Understanding that there are some situations people don't use curly brace, and you must only write one line or one statement after, and that is that. And then the complaints of whether you should use your semicolon or not should use semicolon is another big issue in the JavaScript ecosystem. And another interesting thing is obviously writing good or bad comments is another thing, right? Writing comments that make sense, right? Writing comments that helps you, the engineer, to understand what's going on inside a particular code base. And we also have this ninja code here means that just the ability to what to write code in a better way, in a way that is more consistent, right, in a way that it does make sense and people can really understand what you're trying to do, right? You just want to write code in a way that makes sense. And I mean, there's nothing much to read here other than to write, to type or write code, other than the fact that it's just for you to know that sometimes you need somebody to show you how to write some interesting, consistent patterns of writing good code. And eventually, I plan to talk about automated testing, right? Automated testing is something that is necessary and important if we really want to learn how to write test. So this is me just I'll try to introduce all these things as fast as I can today, and I hope that you will learn a lot here. And I think the last thing I will talk about today is what polyfills and transpilers. Polyfills and transpilers. So I think I've been talking about transpilers or bundlers recently. If anybody has heard me talk, I really emphasize on understanding what bundlers or what transpiler, what they do, and how they help us to write better code. So that is something that we would also be learning today. And with that said, right, I can get started. With that said, I can get started. Any question? Any question? Anything you want me to talk about? Is there anything you want me to talk about? So if there is nothing you want me to talk about, then I can go ahead and just do some form of writing code, since everybody's here to just watch me write code. So there's a JavaScript project on my desktop. I think there should be one JavaScript project on my desktop that I call Introduction to JavaScript. And we're going to pick up from there. So basically, we have these index.js, right? Index.html. That's the place we are starting off. So, what do we have inside of this code? Just normal first HTML stuff. You have your normal HTML stuff, and we have a script tag that talks about what our JavaScript. So, the first thing is that if I run this now, I can run this with a particular extension inside of my VS Code that is popularly referred to as what? A live server. So live server is an extension that I have installed, right? And how do you install the live server? If you want to install a live server, just go into the what? The extension tab of your VS Code. So this is what you refer to as the extension tab of your VS Code. You click on the extension tab of your VS Code and you search for what? Live server. You search for live server. And once you search for live server, you should bring out what the right thing for you there. And once you bring out the live server, you install the first one. The first one is by the guy called Ritwik, by the person called Ritwik Day, right? So that is what you are going to use to run this code. So when you click on the go live, so what the go live does is that the go live helps us to what create a server that we can use to run our code. It helps us to create what a server that we can use to run our code. It helps us to create a server that we can use to run our what our code. our code. We have um we're running on localhost 9999999. So this is the place where our app is running. And if we inspect, and if we check the console, we're going to see this interesting thing running here. So the first thing that is running is what? Hello1. Second one is hello world, hello world, hello world, and hello world. And you have what? JavaScript Jeep in blue right there. So how do we understand what is going on here? So the first thing is that if you want to go to inside of our VS Code, I'll be talking about this in multiple ways, but just I'll show you how this thing looks in different browsers. So there is something you call this debugger session here inside of your Mozilla. I'm inside Mozilla currently, Mozilla, and you notice that it understands my index dot what it knows that my code is running from index, right, which is the index.html. So inside of the index.html, you can see that it understands all this code, right? So when it understands all this code, that's why what this is the HTML that is showing, and eventually when you run to JavaScript here, it's carry out what this beautiful action. When you run your JavaScript, right, it carries out this beautiful action here. So here it is if you go here, nothing is showing here other than this HTML on this H1. But if we want to check our console, you can see all this information like we've seen earlier. So what you want to do is that you want to put this breakpoint here, right? If you put this breakpoint here, so it means that as JavaScript come into this file, and it is what, let's say we refresh this now. The moment you try to refresh, JavaScript pause the execution at line 5. So before line 5 runs, there is a pause on that word execution. Before it gets to line 5, there is a pause on that execution. So now it will do a pause, and now it has paused on line 5. And again, it can pause on line 6, and it can pause on line 7. Right? It can continue to, so long as I am adding this breakpoint, it will continue to what? To stop. But the beautiful thing is that the more I start to use what, so if I want to go past this now, you can either do like a step into, which goes to the next line of execution, or if you do the play button, it runs everything, right? It runs every other thing that is available there. So that is a debugger. And the first point where you are going here is that what we have this debugger tab inside of what Firefox, which is the same thing as your sources inside of your Chrome. So if you want to check your sources inside of your Chrome, so you have it here as what? Sources right there. So sources here gives us a lot of amazing, interesting, cool things that sources gives to us. So you can make it big a little. So on this page, these are all of the JavaScript that is running on this page. These are what all of the JavaScript that is running on this page. These are what all of the JavaScript that is running on this page. And how do I know that? So let's go into what localhost. So I am going to localhost 999. And if you see that now, the moment I am loading this localhost now, the sources here has changed. And now you have this index.html, and you can remember that this index.html is the main thing that is inside of my app. This index.html is the main thing inside of what? My app. And like I said again, we can pause by creating a breakpoint. This is a breakpoint. So if you refresh this, because I have added a breakpoint, it will freeze the execution of your JavaScript on the line that I added a breakpoint. Because I added what the breakpoint, the JavaScript as it is trying to run pause on that line what 5. And that is the first thing you are understanding. The sources tab shows you all the JavaScript files that you are running. And the next thing that you'll be exposed to is what? The ability to what? To pause the execution of JavaScript using what? The breakpoints. So how does breakpoints happen? You come into the source file and click on any valid line. You click on any valid line in your JavaScript, and your compiler now that is trying to run the JavaScript is now aware of what is going on. So now I have paused on line 5. So before this line can run, it will pause. And after that line has finished running, it will pause so that you can check the response and see whether it makes sense. So the first thing I'm very emphasizing on is what we have, what the sources tab inside of your Chrome. And the same sources tab inside of your Chrome is referred to as what? The Fire, what is referred to as the debugger inside of your what? Fire, Mozilla Firefox, right? Most especially the developer edition. Am I making sense? So that is what you call what? You can either use what? The sources inside of your Chrome, or you use your what? Your let's look at the name again. I keep forgetting the name. We use the event what? We call it debugger inside of what? This Firefox browser. Let me see what Edge calls it. So the endpoint is localhost 9999. So if you put a breakpoint at line 5 and then what, line 12, so it pauses at first at 5, how do you tell it to continue? Yeah, I'm going to show you how to tell it to continue now. So here we have this, and let's inspect. So it is called sources here as well. And the reason why they are both sources, right? The reason why your Chrome and Edge is sources is because they are using the same what? Browser engine. Am I making sense? Both of them are using the same browser engine. Can I pause for a second here? Just give me 1 minute. Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, that the first thing that happens to good evening, Martin. Kenechukwu, good evening. How are you? So what we have basically is that you have the sources tab, and the sources tab shows you the JavaScript file that we are running. That's like the first thing. Then we said that you can now create something you call breakpoints. So the first thing here is, because this is a JavaScript file, it allows you to I didn't even know you can put it on an HTML file. So it allows you to put a breakpoint. So if I put a breakpoint on line 5 here, I can also put another breakpoint on line, say line 11 here. So now if I refresh the page, JavaScript engine will pause the execution of this code when it gets to line 5. So you'll notice that when you look at this page now, the HTML has not yet rendered. The HTML has not yet rendered, right? So it definitely means that here at this point that it gets to this line 5, it has not rendered the HTML. So now if you go to the next line, so what Adekunle Olutuyo asks, right? He said that how can it go to the next line? How do you tell it to continue running? So you to tell it to continue running, you will always see these buttons here. Can you see these buttons here? So you have the resume what? The script execution, right? Or you have what? The step over. So the step over goes into the next function call. We have these words, the step into and the step out and the step itself now. And this means you can deactivate the what? The breakpoint. So another thing that is interesting here is that it shows you the call stack. So what did he say? So he said like there is post on breakpoint, right? And when it has paused on breakpoint, this is the line that it has happened. And you are on this line, this is the list of all the breakpoints that we have. And also there's something we call the call stack, right? The call stack shows you all the list of the functions, all the list of the variables, all the list of the cool things that you're using inside that particular JavaScript application that you're running. So that's what like your call stack keeps record of. So here we have something anonymous here. We don't know the name yet. And you can see that based on this line where we are, it has seen what? It has seen that you declared a particular A, but it does not know the value yet. So if you wanted to know the value, so what will you just do? You can you can continue going in, right? So at that point now, it knows that inside the script tag, A was declared as a variable. And you would see that again, it has what? It has gone past A as a variable. Then you can also tell it to watch, right? You can tell it to watch a particular expression that is a particular variable. So watch means that it will be watching that variable. As anything happens to the variable, it will be telling you or informing you. As anything happens to the variable, it will be informing you of what happened. So what else do we have? Hmm. We have, so if you if so it can this step can be going line by line. So it will be going line by line. And if you check your console, right, we just ran LO1. So the LO1 is we just got to that LO1 section. So if you go back into the what? Into the sources tab and you go again, step one more time, it will have run line 7, which is the LO word. And if you go again one more time, right, it has run another hello world again. And if you play like this, let's say play means to resume. So if you play it again, so it will break on the next, it will stop on the next breakpoint. But you see that while it is running all of these things here, the HTML are still not rendered here. Right? The HTML are still not rendered. So we're here on this line here, and you can step into this one by one. Step into it one by one. I think, can we step? Okay, I think I stepped out of that thing there. So, and if I step back into it and play everything, right, it will quickly finish all the script tag, finish this, and render the H1. So that is a little bit about what your sources and your debugging, right? That is right now when you are inside your sources here and you are inside the JavaScript file here, you can now put breakpoints. So breakpoints allow us to stop the execution. So you can see that this line here, I can break on two things. I can break on either the console and I can still break on the log. So if I refresh everything, it will first break on the console, right? And it will tell us the value of the console. Then you can go inside and log something. So to go in, you can use the ordinary step, and it has paused on what? It has paused on what? The log. And you can also what? Run the execution of what? The log by what? Resuming the script execution. And that is your what? So that is your sources. Sources is like your VS Code that is inside of your browser. That is, it will list out all your files, while the ability to put breakpoint helps us to debug our code. The ability to put breakpoint helps us to debug our code. Any question on that? I think it should be clear enough, right? It should be clear. Any question? Okay, I think it's clear. So yeah, part of the idea here is to help you to debug your code, right? That is, you can run your code line by line. So running the code line by line will help you to, sort of like debug the code in a way. So let's say I declare this A variable, and the A is not doing something that I want it to do. All right. So if you debug here and you break it here, so you can see the same button that we saw inside of our Edge browser. You can see them here. So you have the step into, right? The step over, the step into, and step out, and the ordinary step. So it will help you to understand the variable. So when you over on any variable, it will tell you the value of the variable. Hmm. And it will always tell you, okay, this code is inside a script file here. So this is the script file. Then it will tell us all the global variables that we have in JavaScript. And it will tell us about the call stack. And I said again, the call stack is what will tell you all the list of, it will show like all the list of the functions, all the list of the promises, all the list of the actions that your code is trying to do. That's what basically your call stack keep tracks of. Mm. So you might be wondering where this script is coming from, right? So this script is coming from the live server, script that we started. So this is the way live server really works inside, right? They create this JS file. They just add this JS file to anything that we are trying to do. So basically that's that it helps you to debug, right? You can go from one step to the other and you understand what's going on with your JavaScript code. So it helps you to know where there's a bug and where there is no bug, so that for you to be able to detect what is going on in your JavaScript application. So um you can view it in any of the browsers, right? You can view this inside any of the browsers, whether it is Firefox, and you can refresh inside of your Firefox. So when you refresh inside of Firefox, it pauses execution. So all the buttons that you are looking for again, you can see all these buttons here: the resume, the step over, the step in, and the step out. And you can also deactivate all breakpoints. So you can step one after the other. So basically this is your this is our stepping, right? Just stepping through your JS code. So any JS code that you write, you can always step into it. And this stepping into it helps you to, so we've talked about the sources panel. So another thing that you can do is the sources panel has some ability to open code and to run some commands right there. And I think that I should talk about this. There's something that we have inside of our, we also have something you call snippets. I think snippet basically is inside of the of Chrome. So if you look at this place now, when you click on this arrow in your Chrome, you have workspace, you have content script, and you have what? Snippets. So inside the snippets, you are permitted to create a snippet that you want to be, let's say you have a piece of code that you want to be reusing multiple times. You can always write it here and store it. So what the snippet does is snippet allows us to save code and reuse it. Snippet allows us to save code and allow us to reuse it here. So when you are done here, you can save it, right? That's saved, and you can control enter like this. You can run it here to enter it. So basically, right, this is what you have with your, so you can see the snippet is being logged, right? You can see the snippet is being logged there. And so this is your snippet working. So this snippet just allows you to to just like run some. So yeah, I have this code here. So if you go to a site and that site has blocked your ability to copy, so I just run this code, right? And I gain access to be able to like copy or access to like paste something. And this is just so you can any script that you find yourself having to reuse all the time, you can put it in a snippet. Any script you find yourself having to use all the time, you can put it in a snippet. And I think, yeah, that is that with snippet there. So snippet is another very cool thing for you to know about. Mm. So this sources is very interesting. It allows us to debug, and it allows us to to use features like snippet. And this is the main thing here. This is the console here where everything JavaScript happens, right? And here it allows us to to just script. It allows you to script. So when I mean script here, it allows us to write JavaScript code line by line, right? It allows you to write JavaScript code line by line. And this is what? Your what? Console. So we did a function, and anytime you call the function, it will return the sum of what? 2 plus 2. So this is your console. Your console has some interesting things, like you can do filter, you can do levels, right? Whether you want variables, info, warning, or you can also do what? Something like so let's say you have more than just one. So yeah, let's say you have more than one iframe. How many persons know iframe here? I believe we should all know iframes. Iframes are just like another browser entirely. So if you have like another browser entirely, right, you can click on this button, and let's say you want to use the console of that other one. So you will see the console of that particular iframe. So just the way this one is saying top localhost 999, you will see the name of that new iframe, and you also be able to talk to the console of that new iframe. So basically, that is another very cool interesting feature. You can clear your console, you can bring your error, like just show me error warnings, just show me warnings. You can use this side filter as well to filter things here. And yeah, basically that is how what your console also works. Our console also works. So feel free to just play around with the console and the sources tab. I feel free to play around with the console and the sources tab. I talked a little bit about this as well, right? The ability to what? To next, to step over, to step into, right? There. And yeah, we've talked about the console right there. We've talked about breakpoints, right? Let me talk about this debugger keyword. So if I go into the code that we have written and I put what? Let's say I put debugger at the top. And I save this code and I try to run this code. But automatically you see that because I put this debugger keyword and the app, once the app refresh itself, it does not respect the breakpoint again. No, it actually pauses on the line where there is that debugger. So what the debugger will do is what? It helps you to pause your execution of your JavaScript code programmatically now. Before you have to use the breakpoints to control the pause, but now with the debugger keyword, you don't need what that you don't need to use breakpoints. You can just use like the debugger itself to just continue to like do things on your own. And that's the advantage of what using the debugger keyword. Debugger keyword allows you to just like go ahead and do stuff, go ahead and do stuff. Most especially go ahead and what understand how the code is working. So once you put a debugger, it stops the execution of the code, and then you can either what continue to to step in, to step out based on whatever you need to achieve. And that is the idea of what your debugger keyword. Again, the debugger keyword helps us to stop the execution of any JavaScript code. It grips it, stops it, so that we can operate on it. Any question? Any question? I feel like hmm, so let me try to write some code inside of I'll write some code inside of the I'll write some code inside of my IDE, and then we can try to debug the code together, and we're going to fix the problem with the code. That's what we're just going to try to do. So here I'm going to write a function that had so this function had two things. I'm also going to write another function. Okay, yeah, I'm going to write another function. And so we have a function called get values. So where this function we get values is that this function will get values from our user. So how do you ask your user for something? There is something we call prompt. So you can prompt somebody to what? Enter what? The first number. And we can store that thing inside what? Let what? So what this is going to do is, let's just do this here. Let's just do this. And let's alert so what happens here, right? What happens here is that we have this function called add, and we have another function called get values. So to call these functions, right, you need to call the function with a function signature. But before we call the add, let's just call get values. So if you call get values and we go to the browser, right, to run this code. So because there is the debugger there, it is pausing the code. So we don't want that behavior, right? You don't want the debugger behavior. So you can remove this debugger. Just comment it out. And if we comment this out, we can then do what? A refresh here. Let's just resume here. So we can just put this here. So this is not what I want. Hmm. So you can see that now that I refresh now, it is stopping at the breakpoint. So I don't want it to stop at the breakpoint. Again, I can refresh the whole thing. So now, if I refresh the whole thing, I am not pausing anything. So I am not breaking point. I am not using the debugger keyword. So our code has run in the console. You see that all the console code has run. So after the console code has run, what is the next thing? Right? It is asking us for this. And what is it asking us? Where is this enter first number in our code? If you check our code here, you will see that what? It will have run this. It is attempting to run this, and that's why we are here. It is asking us enter the first number. So the first number would be say 10, and let's say the other one is 900. So you can see now that there is what? After the two prompt, we have what? Alert. That is alert num1, alert the num, and alert what? Num2. And so when you look at it there, you press OK there, you have what? Both 10 and 90. That is your alert, right? Working there. So prompt helps us to take something from somebody. And alert helps us to show something, right? Alert allows us to show something. And there's the other one, which is confirm. Confirm helps us to make a confirmation. So if your confirmation is true, you use if your confirmation is true, you use a true state. If your confirmation is true, you press OK, which will result into a true statement. If your confirmation is false, you use the cancel, which will result into a false statement. So I'm going to show you also how that works. So inside of this get value, say I want to alert the result of the sum, right? So I want to say that the result of sum of what? What's the first value? The sum of num and num2 is what? Add. That is what? Whatever the addition of what? Ordinary num and ordinary num2 is. That's what the result will be. So let's say inside of this addition now, I put subtraction here. So if we want to run this code, you can save this code and let's run it. So here is asking for what? 90 and is asking for 10. And so if you do what? 90 minus 10, what should you get? 90 minus 10. 90 minus 10 is supposed to give us 90 minus 10. That's supposed to give us around 80, thereabout. We can use them dialog box. We can then use dialog boxes. You mean the prompt? Is that what you're referring to, Afiz? Is that what you're referring to as the dialog boxes? Is it a prompt? You want to call the prompt a dialog box? I'm not sure whether we want to call the prompt a dialog box. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Should they be called dialog box? Dialog box. Hmm. I didn't know it's confirmed. I never knew. Okay, okay. Okay, okay. I see why you can call it a dialog box because because of the way the button is and because you cannot do anything, right? They don't allow you to do anything except you communicate to them first. They hold you ransom. They pause the execution of everything. I think I see what you guys are saying there. Hmm. So is prompt also prompt? So is prompt also a dialog box? So prompt also displays a dialog box that prompts the user. Okay. So basically, the theory of them is we can call the theory of them a dialog box, like Afi said. Yes, yes, we can refer to them as a dialog box, just the way you said. Hmm. That's nice, but I don't know. They're not common in this modern generation of writing web development. Anybody notice that both your both your prompt alert confirm they're not common in this modern usage. I really don't know why. I don't know why they are not common. Mm, I really can't say. I guess that this generation doesn't just want to use. This generation doesn't just want to use. We just want to build everything by ourselves. This generation is quite different from like the old generation of engineers. People really don't want to use those prompt, dialogue, and all these other guys anymore. People just want to like build their own stuff. I mean, you can build your own dialogue box, right? Something that looks like prompt. You can build your own, right? You can always learn to build your own. So it's not something that serious. And maybe the need of users, the need of users is also much. Probably found out other ways to get the info. Yeah, yeah. You would definitely find other ways to get the info. I mean, you can put like two inputs on the screen and get your info from two inputs, right? You can put two inputs on the screen and get it right that from your users. So let's just debug this, right, and fix this one here. We know that a function add should not have negative, but how do we know, right, that it should not have negative? Or better still, another thing is coming to another idea is coming to my head. I can remove this plus here. And if I go to my local host, so it is asking me to enter the first value. So I want to enter the first value as 2 and the second value as another 2. But my result is what? 2. The result of what? The sum of 2 and 2 is what? 0. Is this correct? No. So how do we know what to do? It's either we go to our sources, right? Locate your code and put a breakpoint. And we start what? Debugging our code one after the other. So you can refresh it now, right? Because you had a breakpoint. Anytime you had a breakpoint, you can refresh. So you can see that it has prompt stop on this prompt. So you can play it. And the moment you play it, you can put what? 67. So when you put 67 there, 67, you can now over on what? You can now over on that what number there to see the value that was added. So this is what your what debugging capacity gives to you. So when I over on it, put my cursor on that variable, I know what the value is. And much more importantly now, look at inside of what? After the scope, you have something we call local, right? Which is something you refer to as this here, which is what? Another interesting thing. So you will understand how the code is running, right? Based on the way you're trying to debug it. So you understand that what? If you press the continue again, it will ask you for the second number. So you can put 20. So you can see here that what? It is labeling it num1, num, and num2. And now it is supposed to run line 25. Line 25. So how do you make it run line 25? You can play again, right? So it will now tell you that the sum of 67 and what? 20 is equals to 47. The sum, can the sum be that? No, there's a bug. So how do we fix the bug? What is going on? How do you fix this now? How do you fix this? Anybody? How do you fix this with our debugger? How do you fix this with our debugger? So you want to put a debugger on this line, what? Put a debugger on this line, call 16. And we can refresh the whole thing again. So if you refresh it, right, and you play it, it asks for you to pass a value. You can pass 100. You prompt it again, you can press 1. And if you now want to run line 28 now and you press this, so automatically it is now pausing on line what? On line 16 because of our what? Breakpoint. And because of our breakpoint, you can see the value of A and you can see the value of B. And based on the value of B, you can now understand, oh, what are they trying to do? They're also trying to do 100, which is what? String 100 minus what? String 100 minus 1 itself. And that's not what you want, to be honest. We don't want to be adding string minus string. But this is now going to help us to know that this is minus. And this is supposed to be what? Plus. So when you set a debugger or when you set a breakpoint, they help you to break through the code and to understand where the bugs is coming from. And that's the idea of what your debugger, the breakpoints, and all these other guys that we have talked about now. So you can continue playing it, right? It will continue to solve the problem. So if we want to fix the problem, you can just come here and put a plus here. Or we can go into our VS Code and replace it with a plus. So again, another problem is So if you maybe refresh this old code now, let's say we remove this breakpoint. If you don't want to use breakpoint, what can we use? So you can bring in your what? Debugger. And everything will work what? Just refresh the whole thing. So you can see that what when you refresh the whole thing, it pauses on line what? On line 19, because you have now put your debugger there. And you can now step into it one after the other. So when you step through, you will see that it is executing the JavaScript code line by line. It is executing the JavaScript code line by line. And that is the beautiful thing with what? Your debugger. So it's asking me to put something there, which is 90. And again, it's asking me for another thing. Second what? Number is what? 10. And so you can see the value of A is 90 and the value of B is what? 100. And you can return the what? The summation of what? 90 and what? 100. And so you can see the result here is what? 90, 100. That's another bug. How can the result of adding 90 and 100 be what? 90, 100. So how do we fix the bug? So eventually it is just joining the strings together because we didn't convert the numbers here, right? So if you want to convert it, you can just come here and use the unary what? Use the unary plus sign to convert whatever prompt is giving us to convert it into numbers. So here you can convert what? Plus. Just put plus here. And that automatically converts for you. There are other methods to convert what? To convert number string to number that I explored in the past live videos that I talked about. So you can check that and to understand how to convert stuff here. So that's basically how to use your console, how to use your debugger, and how to use all these other tools. I don't know if anybody has any question. If anybody has any question with the debuggers on the tools and how to get into them. So I take that as like no. I mean, I don't think we can really write JavaScript or debug a JavaScript code without using console.log. I don't think so. Is it possible? Is it possible to debug a JavaScript code without using console.log? It should be possible, but definitely it's going to be stressful. But your console.log helps you to quickly understand what is going on. And even more, when you use a debugger or a breakpoint, it becomes more easy to understand what is going on in the JavaScript code. So when you are writing code, when you write your first function, put a space and write the name of the function. Open the bracket, write your first parameter, put a comma and put another space. So you notice that I am used to writing my functions that way. Make sure you write your functions in a way, right, that has a consistent, like I didn't format this code at all. This is just the normal way I write code now because I've been writing it for a long period of time. You must try to write your code in a consistent manner. When I see some other person's code, sometimes I used to be ashamed, right? Because the code is not well formatted. And once the code is not well formatted, it becomes very difficult for the engineer to be even to debug what is going on. So even if I want to help you sometimes, right, but your code is not I mean, your code is not well written, right? It will be very difficult. So it is important to write your code in a way that is what consistent. Put space, right? So this is the second line here. So you're advised to you put what, 2 spaces, and after you've put what, your space here, you can now declare the variable in the proper manner. So now you're learning how to write code, right, with proper spacing, the spacing before the curly bracket, the spacing here. Writing your code like this without you using any formatter is an advantage that you want to do for yourself. So you want to teach yourself or train yourself to use a consistent word code pattern, to always put space where you should put space, to always use tab where you should use tab, to always indent your code properly, so that if anybody would even help you or check the code base later, at least they will see that, oh, this engineer likes to write their code in a consistent manner. And anytime you see the curly braces, what does the curly braces signify in JavaScript? The curly braces signifies what? Like there is more than one statement. That's the idea of curly braces. So you don't also want to write something like this. It doesn't make any sense. And you can also write it like this without the curly braces if it's just one word. If it's just one thing, one statement that you're carrying out. If it's just one statement you're carrying out, you can always what? Do without your curly braces, right? That is what your so just making sure we sort of like write our code in a consistent manner, right? It will help you, right? Your muscle memory, your brain start writing code in a way that makes sense. And that's something that you need to start doing. When you write your code, put space where you should put space, put tabs, right? So also determine whether you want to use 4 spacing or 2 spacing. So, some engineers like to use 4 spacing, some other engineers like to use 2 spacing. So it depends on what your organization is using. So learn to write code. Again, understand how to write good code. Understand how to write good code. That is something that is very, very important. So the indentation of your code, right? Just write it in a way that makes sense. And the idea of using semicolon right there is another controversial issue, right? Should you use semicolon? Should you not use semicolon? My take here is that if you have noticed the way I write my code, sometimes I use semicolon and sometimes I don't use semicolon, right? So it all depends. However, when you are just starting, it is advisable to put semicolon in almost all what you're doing. It is very key, right? That in everything you're doing, always what put some form of semicolon. It helps a lot to make your code sort of like consistent, right? It helps you to run away from some bugs and some problems. So that is what my advice for writing consistent code. Again, like I said, I didn't format this code, but I am used to writing code that is well structured, right? Just because I write it over and over, right? So just make sure you start putting in that conscious effort to start trying to write what code that has consistent structure. Put the space where you should put space, put indentation, right, where you should put them, and eventually start using tools like Prettier and ESLint to also format your code, right, as it should be. So another thing that also we should also talk about, right, is mm, hmm, maybe another thing I should talk about is something that we're going to talk about later. When you write a function, where do you place the functions? So it also depends. So another thing with the coding style is that when you go to a company or when you join a company, the company can have some standards of the way they write what their JavaScript code. Like for example, now Google has a standard of writing their JavaScript. I think they published it recently. Um, so different companies have standards, right, of the way they write their JavaScript. So you want to just write your code. So some persons can put first the function declarations before calling the code, and some persons can put what, the code first before writing the functions. But whichever approach you take, right, just understand that eventually all the functions move up when the compiler tries to run the code. When your JavaScript compiler tries to run the code, all the functions, they are hoisted up. They move up. The compiler automatically moves them up. And that is something you call what? Hoisting. So again, try to go through all of these guides, the Google JavaScript guide, the Airbnb JavaScript guide, the idiomatic JS Java the guide, or go through the standard by guide. So please go through some of these guides to help you. And another thing is what, whatever you have, you can also understand that there are tools that can help you to do your linting. I've talked about ESLint, but here they mentioned JS lint, right? JS int and what, the ESLint. So they talked about what, all these tools, all these linters, they help you to pick error before your code gets to what, production. So if you want to know more about ESLint, right, you can click on this link here to go to what, to learn more about ESLint. Definitely for comments, the idea is to what, write comments as necessary, and make sure your comment is not too much, right? Just write your comment as necessary, and make sure your comment is also describing what the action you want to remember. Because why we put comments in code is because if somebody else joined the team, you want them to have an idea of something that is hard or something that is technical that you're trying to do. So the idea of having what, um comments in our code, right, helps us to, to just be able to communicate our code to people who will be reading the code later. Eventually, don't forget, your code is what other persons will read later, whether you like it or not. So don't write code because you are the only person writing the code. Just don't think like, well, I'm the only person. It's just me. I'm just trying to learn JavaScript, so I don't have to put comments. No, right? Start putting comments, whether it's a single line comment, whether it's a multi-line comment, or whether it is what, a JS doc comment. Let me show you what I mean. So this is a comment here, right? So this is a function adding two numbers. You can also do what? Use the multi-line comment. So this is a multi-line comment. So this is a multi-line comment. And if you want to do a JS doc comment, so this is an example of a JS doc comment. So you want to understand how to do all this kind of what, writing comments. You want to understand how to write this comment, because this JS doc comment sort of helps you, right, to be able, so if I overrun, so it will tell you what the type is. So that is the advantage of what, writing what, your JS doc kind of comment. So this kind of comment is necessary at times. It is called JS doc kind of comment. So this is the function, what the function is doing, and you can see what each of the parameters here they are doing. So this is what example of JS doc comment. If you want to read more about it, right, you can do something like JS So this is JS right? It talks about how to use the JS comment. So that is that about what JS comment. And one last thing that I want to talk about, or one of the last things that I want to talk about, not just the exact last thing. Write your code in a way that, so don't write your code in a way that looks like this. This is too technical or complex. Write your code in a way that you're communicating to somebody. Don't just write complex code. Don't just write code that people cannot read. Write code in a way that would give your functions good name. Don't use one single letter, right? Just you use I and J inside of your for loop. I know everybody still does that. So please write your code in a way that makes sense, up down to the declaration of your variable. Choose your variable carefully. All these things are little tricks that you can build into how you write your code, and that's why I'm talking about them now. And yeah, there's something we refer to as writing tests, right? Because when you write a software, you also write tests to test that software, whether the software is working the way it should work. Sorry. I started a bit late. Um, I started a bit late. I think I started around like 3:30 thereabout, I guess. I'm sorry. My body is I'm feeling lazy because there's no work today. Like I'm feeling lazy because there's no work. And today is like my time to talk to family and friends. I've not spoken to some persons in a long while because we've not had like any time to rest. So apologies for for starting this stream late, but you can always catch like the replay of the stuff side. We didn't write too much of code today, just trust me. This one is just about talking, and just getting us to know some information, right? Some of the necessary things that you need to know or to be aware of before you start like writing like full-fledged code. So I hope it won't be difficult for you to like quickly catch up on the replay. All right. So I just want to talk about testing briefly, right? And I'm not going to do anything serious. So, so I like what Afi said there. This one is instant replay, no waiting for upload. All right. So, as software engineers, right, you might be thinking about it that why will somebody that is just learning how to write code, why should you know about tests? But the truth is that if you want to start learning how to write code, you also want to start learning how to test code. Does that make sense? Did you get what I just said there? If you want to learn how to write code, you also want to learn how to test code. It is very important. Most engineers who are learning code would want to just write code and they don't want to write test. So what is test? Test means that you're going to test a particular code, right? To what? To test it to see whether it is performing what it's supposed to perform. You know, earlier before, turned this addition to a subtraction just to test this code. So if we have tests written, those tests will sort of guide us, right? They will be like what? Guide and help us to what? Understand that, well, this code that we've written, this is the bug here, and this is why this code is failing. So basically, that's what test does. And basically, when we talk about test, we also have some approach to software development. Like you have what? The BDD, right? The BDD kind of, development approach. And you can see that in this approach right here, you will describe the behavior of what that thing is doing. So with this test here, can somebody tell us what they are trying to do here? Based on what you are seeing here, what do you think they are trying to do? Based on what you think they are doing here. Based on what you think they are doing there, what do you think? Based on the code that I highlighted, what do you think is happening? Hmm. What do you think is happening? So you can see that they are saying that it raises something to n power. And if you do 2 raised to power 3, what happens? Right? So basically, they are trying to create a function that can implement the feature of raised to power. And that's what they're trying to do. And so this is a behavior, right? Based on how this thing is going to behave, right? That's the way we will now write the code. So that's behavior driven development thing. Yeah, they're trying to test the power of a number, right? Using the number and the power, then the result. So basically, anytime we're trying to write test, in the idea of writing test, you start with 2 major things. You start with describing what that thing is going to do, and you start with what? Test cases. So the first thing is what you describe, right? The second thing is what you have test cases, and then you have something we call what? Assertion. So those are the 3 major things that you have in test. You do a describe, you do what? The cases, and you do an assert. To assert that something is what? True, or to assert that something is equal, to assert that something does what it's supposed to do. So basically, let me show you how to write. Let's just write some let's just write something small with this Mocha. So how do we write something small with this Mocha thing? So we're just going to go to Stanley. Hi. So we're just going to come here and try to do something here. So just ignore some things that maybe you've not heard before, which is like npm. So if you have not heard npm before, just ignore it. It's not anything serious. Okay. I just want to use that idea to set you up to quickly show you something. And I think that I'm just going to paste this here. Can anybody, I don't know, Stanley, if you can help me confirm whether, if you can help me confirm whether, which version does Node, the test runner inside of Node, which version does the test runner inside of Node? Which version of Node has the inbuilt test runner? You can help me confirm that. I think it should be 21 or 20. 21 or 20. So basically, I just install Mocha as a local, as a global variable. So I can now do something like Mocha, right? And it will allow it to what? To run, right? It will allow me to use it as a command. So now, once we have Mocha inside of our code, right? We just want to do, maybe you just want to do something like what? Touch test.js, and you want to do a code test. So inside of this test.js now, we can then do something like, so you can do a describe test runner. Okay, so this test runner starts working inside version 21.7. So what that means is that there is a test runner that is built inside Node.js, right? So I was saying earlier that what you have describe, then you have a string like this, and then you put a comma, you put another function, right? And inside of that function, you close the function. So inside of the function, you write your test cases. Test cases. So let's assume that we copy this function. Let's say we just copy this function. So the first test case here would have been something like, look at this now. You're saying that what? It should return 3. That is, it should return 3 is the string describing the test case. And you're now saying that what will be inside that test case? Create a function and put what? We can't put expect because expect will not work here. I think expect will not work. But expect is something that works inside of your maybe jest or Vitest or Jasmine. I don't know whether expect works inside Jasmine, but I know it works inside jest and Vitest because they have what built in what. So what we can do is we can use something we call what assert, which is built, right, which is sort of like built inside of your Mocha. So how do you like use it here? That is something called what, using require JS. So I can do a const assert and I can now do what, assert dot equal what, So when you do what? The addition of what? 1, comma 2, right? Assert that what? That is equals to 3. And you can put your semicolon there. So this assert equal will check whether this one is equals to this. Basically, that is what your assert does for you. And how do we run this code? We can come here and do Mocha So you can see here that it's telling me that what? Well, there's one test here. The title of the test is what? Should return 3. It is not passing. It is failing. Why? Assert error. It was supposed to what? It's supposed to be what? 3, but I am getting -1. So you are able to what? To understand that, well, something is wrong. So you go back to your code, right? To check what is wrong in this code. Oh, you find that this is minus. Oh, this is supposed to be plus. We are doing addition. And that is what basically your understanding of writing tests to do. Tests will help us to pick errors where there are errors in our code. So if you run this again one more time, right? So you can see now that what? It is now passing. So that is basic way of what? Writing what? Just writing tests. So this is what? One test case. So you can do another test case here. That what? You can do another test case there. And if you go back here again and run it, so here you can see that this one is passing as well. So another thing we can do is, what are the edge cases, right? There's something we call edge cases. So you can do for 0, or you can do for something like edge case for addition is that it should only what? Add numbers. This is one edge case. And you can do your function. That is, if somebody put assert dot equals what? Equals add 1, comma what? 1, comma 2. It should not work. Because naturally 1 plus 1 should not work. And if we run our test now, it's going to fail. So you can see that this is the idea of running tests. That is, test helps us to what? To find where there are what? Loopholes in our what? To find areas where there are loopholes in our what? In our code, in the things that we're trying to do. And that's the idea of what test brings to the table. So this is just introduction, right? I'm not teaching you how to write tests. I'm just introducing you to it. So again, what is the major thing here in writing tests? The major thing here in writing tests is what? There must be a describe, right? And there must be a hit. So this describe tells us what the general thing is trying to do, and the it here is telling you that what the use cases, the test cases that you're trying to test, right? That's what testing is basically doing there. So this is just an introduction to, like, you should understand. Again, the key tag that I'm emphasizing on is, if you're learning to write JavaScript, you must learn to test the JavaScript. What I'm saying again, I'm going to repeat it clearly. If you're learning to write JavaScript, you must learn to test JavaScript. Don't just write code, right? Just come and write code and become part of the group of the engineers that can write code and don't want to write testable codes. Okay, try to pick up the habit of testing these codes as you write them. Try to pick up what the habit of what testing code as you write them. So as you're learning now JavaScript from the beginning, make sure you start asking questions around, okay, so how do I write test? And for your information again, this test here is running through Node.js. So we can write the one that will what we can write maybe one that would maybe that would use the browser later on. And we can write one that will use the browser later on. But this is just an introduction to test, so I don't want to dwell too much on it. So if you want to really go deeper into test, we have Mocha, right? Which one else do we have? We have Jest, IO, and we have Vitest, and you have what the inbuilt what test runner inside Node.js. Node test runner. So Node has something for us to write test, right? It has support for what the describe and the it syntax. And this is really a plus because you don't have to install an external package to really write tests now inside of Node.js. I think I should have the latest Node.js here. I don't know if I have nvm list. We can do nvm install LTS. Is it advisable to use more than test runner? Let's say Mocha and just in a single code base. No, I don't think you want to do that. That's that. Well, there might be cases that can require that, but in rare cases, should you have something like that? Because basically, most of them have the same. Most of them are just trying to solve the same problem. They're basically trying to solve the same problem. So I don't think because they're solving the same problem, then we bring the same tool to do the same thing inside of the same code base. I don't think that would be very ideal. What's the latest version of Node.js? 21.7. So Node.js redesigned their site. How many persons have seen that? Node.js redesigned their site recently. What do you think about the redesign? What do you think about this? And they use Next.js. I think they use Next.js. So if you want to know whether somebody is using Next.js or not, once you can see this underscore next here, right? This is Next.js there. It's not bad. They're trying to sell Node.js and some of the new features that they are working on. Yeah, they just released it last week. It's just one landing page though, so it doesn't have anything special. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. But they can do better than this though. Because I feel like they can sure do better than this. So you can do nvm install 21.7 point. Which version is it we should install again? 21.7.1. So we can do nvm use 21.7.1. So you can see now that, can you see this? That switch from the V2010 to V21.7.1. So we are able to use, how do you use the node runner now, the test runner? How do you run it? Mm. Okay, so you can do node hyphen test, node double hyphen test hyphen watch. Okay. So we want to do something like const describe. Can we use npm to install the latest version of Node? No, you can't use npm, right? You need to install something called nvm, which is called Node Version Manager. That was very fast. Did you see that? Did anybody see that? That was crazy fast. Ooh. Ooh. Are you kidding me? That was crazy fast. Mm. I mean, I didn't even know that something ran. So this ran with 0.4 milliseconds. This ran in like 0.1 milliseconds. And this one ran in 2.9 milliseconds. And when we ran with Mocha, Mocha was running, Mocha was running for like, I think 10, 10, everything was around 10 to 12 milliseconds from Mocha. So, I mean, so again, sometimes you don't have to install all these tools again because of some of the new features that you have inside of Node.js, right? So you don't have to install I don't think like there'll be need for you to install Mocha or all these guys anymore. So and they are doing some reporting. They are telling us which line is failing. So this line is failing here, right? Because we are doing this here. Wow, that is so fast. Wow. So you can see that for yourself, right? That JavaScript is coming up in good hands, and there's a lot of all these new things inside of JavaScript. Yeah. So this is just idea of just getting started with writing test, right? Just idea of getting started with writing test. Then the hyphen watch is not working. The hyphen watch is not working. I don't know why it's not working, but based on the documentation, I don't know why the hyphen test is not working. So basically, all test package uses describe and hit. Yeah, most of them uses describe and hit, right? Yeah, most uses describe and hit. So they have some nice, interesting things that they're already doing here that you can really learn from. Yeah, very nice stuff. Very nice stuff. So you can just understand what I was trying to introduce you to, how to write, how to get introduced into writing tests. So another thing that you can do is you can also get into the idea of writing tests inside of the browser, right? Because Mocha supports the idea of writing tests in the browser. That's still some area that front-end JavaScript has to improve on, which is the ability to write tests in the browser. The front end side of JavaScript. Now, that is when I say front end side, I mean JavaScript inside of the browser has to sort of like improve the idea of how to write tests in the browser, which is still it's still a little bit out of date, right? So they have to do some improvements around that. And what else? Yeah, that's basically most of the things I wanted to talk about today. I mean, the last one would have been to talk about polyfills and transpilers. So, what is polyfill? Polyfill is something that enables us to use new features in JavaScript. Polyfill is something that enables us to use new feature in JavaScript, even if those features are not inside of the browsers. Do you understand? Polyfills allow us to use what new features inside of JavaScript, like inside of our browser, even when those features are not yet available. For example, very soon we are going to be having a new date system inside of JavaScript, which is called temporal. Temporal. So temporal, right? This temporal, right, allows is just a new way of us using date, because the old way of doing date, now the normal way of declaring date with the date constructor is going to be, they would probably tell people to stop using that and move everybody to this new thing called temporal, right? If you want to get to know more about it, you can start reading about it now. And this is some of the things I've been talking about, right? If you really want to know more about JavaScript, right, you want to come here to really dig into all these new things that are coming. And this is already on stage 3. And anything that reaches stage 3 will be adopted into the browser for sure. Anything that gets to stage 3 will be adopted into the browsers. So I believe by now most browsers are already building their implementation of temporal right now. So, and part of the thing that temporal brings that is interesting is, For example, we have this thing here. So this is another thing that we have here. So this is the next TC39 meeting. The next TC39 meeting is on I think it's on April. The next TC39 meeting is on April. April when? Where's April what? It should be April. The 101, 101st, 101. How do you call 101? The 101st meeting of TC39 is on April. April 8, 9, 10, and 11. And if you want to read about the last meeting that happened, right, you can also get to know about the last meeting that happened right here. So you can get to understand what happens in the last meeting right here. So basically, why am I bringing all these things up? Right, because these are all the things that are coming into JavaScript. So you can see here that this is in stage 3 already, right? This is in stage 4 for sure. If this is in stage 4 already, they are going to build this. Anything that enters stage 4, because stage 4 is the final stage. So if something gets to stage 4, right, I mean that's like the final stage. Yeah. So you can see these ones here. These are like, so somebody's proposing that there should be math.sum, right? Somebody's proposing that there should be math.sum. What else? I mean, there are interesting things that you can really learn off here. But the thing I wanted to show you is that because the next meeting is on April. So this is what? Look at this here now. This is a new way of declaring time. So if they said that what for this meeting time, to get the meeting time in your time zone, go to the temporal docs and run this code in the dev2 console. So you can copy this code, go to the temporal docs, right click and inspect. And when you right click and inspect, you can paste it. So you can see this one in here. That what? There's a polyfill of what? The temporal that is inside of this browser. So if you paste this here, or if you just type temporal, so you can see that what? Now temporal is working here. So temporal has what? A class for calendar, has a class for what? Duration, a class for instant, a class for now, a class for plain date, a class for plain date time. It has a class for what? Plain month day. It has a class for plain time. It has a class for plain year. It has a class for what? Time zone. And it has a class for what? The zone, date, time. So these are interesting things that you need to really get used to, right? Because these are the new things that you're going to be using as an engineer. So you can paste what they ask us to paste. So if you paste this code here, it will now tell you what. So it is using the zone date time. From this time, it allows you to chain with time zone. Give me with time zone of what? So compare this and give us what this April will be in my time zone. So if you strike enter, so it means that it is going to be what? The 4th of April, and it's going to be by what? By 9 a.m. EST. Right, so that's what temporal brings to the. So this is what the new date API is bringing here. So, and the reason why we're able to use this is because there's a polyfill, right? And if you want to know about the polyfill, right, you can click on this link right here, and it will take you to the polyfill. So, what is polyfill? Polyfill is just something that allows you to what? To be able to use modern version of something that is not yet built into the browser. The polyfill allows us to be able to use it. And that's the idea of what? Polyfills. And the last thing I want to talk about is what? Transpilers. I mean, the idea of transpilers are really like stale and they are gone, right? But basically, transpilers are tools that allow us to translate our code. They help us to translate our code, right? And they're just software that helps us to translate source code into another source code, right? It just helps us to pass the code And so basically, again, Babel was serving as a transpiler. When Babel was still available, Babel was serving as a transpiler, right? So before optional chaining was inside of the browser, so what we could do is that we could use what if you want to use optional chaining, you have to make sure that you're using it inside the transpiler. So when the transpiler implemented something like this, they put something like this inside here. So anytime you run this here, this is what you're going to be seeing here. So basically, right, the transpiler and the polyfills, they like work hand in hand together, right? They are cool stuffs that work hand in hand that can help you to just the goal again is they help us to write modern version of JavaScript. And alongside with these transpilers, right, you will be talking more about bundlers because you'll be using something called bundlers more, which is example of your Webpack, Vite, TurboPack, and all these other guys, and all these different build tools that we need in order to be able to write JavaScript, most especially for you to be able to write modern JavaScript. So if you want to really survive in this ecosystem, you want to start reading about all these modern tool chains, right? NPM, PNPM, Yarn, transpilers, and all these other things here. You want to start reading about it, right, before we get deeper. So in the next, episode, right, I'm going to be introducing the idea of objects. But tomorrow, I am going to continue my Node.js exploration. That's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. So I don't know. I can bring this stream to a close. I can bring the stream to a close today. It's been amazing 2 hours plus of just talking to JavaScript, talking to you guys about JavaScript and cool stuff. I started talking about Dino. I think I started talking about Dino. That was the first thing I talked about for like 30 minutes. Yeah. So you can also check Dino to know what goes on with Dino. And after on, I started talking about the debugger, breakpoints, stepping into your code, stepping out of your code. And yeah, we talked about writing code in a formatted way. Start writing your code in a consistent way. Also start using comments, right? So you can use a single line comment, you can use the multi-line comment, or you can use your JS doc, right? Afiz, Afiz said there's so much still to learn from you. I mean, I'm also learning. So as you're learning from me, I'm also learning. We're all learning together, right? I think that's the big deal there, right? We're all constantly learning together, right? And it's just cool to be able to learn and learn together. Thank you for joining this stream. See you guys tomorrow, right? Bye.